Ouija Board Session, Volume 1, Number 4.
Are you still there?
Jeff Ritzman, it's Halloween time, and you know what that means.
Boo.
That's correct.
That's what that means.
Corn. Yeah.
Woo.
The Ouija board special is upon us.
No, it's upon you, pal, not me.
My friends from high school, Paul and Tracey, are going to join us momentarily to talk about all of the hijinks. If you hear rain tapping outside my window, that's because rain is tapping outside my window.
Ah.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone actually hears that or not, but just in case. And I don't know, should I apologize up front in case it's a little disheveled up until Jeff takes over? Because it might be the sort of thing where we all know what we're talking about, and we assume everyone else is on the same page, but then Jeff comes in and is like, I have no idea what you guys just said. Let's try to recontextualize this.
Well, it's more along the lines of just chronology, like, walk me through where we're at, because it's nonetheless interesting. I'll put it to you that way. You'll be able to follow along, but towards the end, you'll get a little bit of a, like, how did this progress to a certain point, and then how did it end?
Or you could just be slow.
Yeah. And that may be true in my current state, but I don't think so.
I do. Okay, anyway.
Oh, great.
What?
You're fired.
Ooh, I hear voices.
Scary.
All right, so without further ado, let's get to the show, unless we have anything to talk about right up front.
No, we can roll right into it.
All right. And we'll do that right after this.
If you record audio for any purpose, chances are you want it to be heard. You want to attract the largest audience possible who can hear your message. That's where we come in. We're cyberears.com, a revolutionary internet service that will host your audio files and help you promote and track its popularity. Considering hosting a podcast to the world? We have all the automated tools to make the process as simple and easy as it can be. No technical mumbo-jumbo to work out. Cyberears.com does all the work for you. You record it, we take care of the rest. So don't delay. Go to cyberears.com today and register for a free trial account. Upload your audio files and get heard. With cyberears.com, it's your audio on your terms.
How did they hurt you, Damon? Did they laugh at you? Did they not believe? Did they make jokes about you, Damon? You didn't like that.
Paratopia, upon further review, the first third of this show is a bit of a cluster fudge. Reason being, I haven't talked to these folks in, well, Tracey I haven't talked to since high school, I don't think, and Paul I haven't talked to in at least a decade. I'm old! So it was pretty exciting just to be able to talk to them, and I was trying to create a constructive timeline, but it's hard to do that when people, jump to the memories that most impacted their lives. So I think I got caught up in the moment of it and did not do my job as a good and decent co-host. So I'll do that right now. Not unlike Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, where with the DVD, he included an insert card that explained the timelines, so that people who didn't get the plot would get the plot. He did that because he's a horrible filmmaker. I'm doing it because I'm a horrible podcaster. In any event, as best as I can recall, the timeline of events that we're going to muddle through and then Jeff is going to clarify goes something like this. We play with my Ouija board. I think Tracey probably found it in my closet and was like, oh, what's this? And the first character on there is this guy, Damon Roquet, who claims to be from a small village in France, seems to be really religious, seems to be anti-drug, anti-anything except the Catholic religion. And then, I guess through some taunting of mine, he becomes a little more demonic than that, changes his name to Acre, and so we implore the help of our friend Stacy's older sister, Kim. Stacy's mom is a psychic. Kim grew up with this stuff, so she'll know what to do. So we have some Ouija board sessions with Kim where she calls to the board her Uncle Bobby, her dead Uncle Bobby, obviously. We think we get rid of Acre for a while at least. This plot unfolds where Tracey's mother's recently deceased boyfriend is trying to tell us something, and what he's trying to tell us is that basically he died at the hands of another drug dealer. He was a drug dealer himself, and he died at the hands of another drug dealer because wherever he was staying, the room was bugged. I don't know. That part is murky beyond that to me because I don't know what all of her personal family history is there with that. But that was the setup, and there was another subplot with a friend Adam that developed that we'll get into, or at least I will, at the beginning of this show. So there are these little branch-off subplots. That was the main plot. That was sort of the timeline. And then it culminated with this thing coming to the board claiming to be the devil that did a bunch of spectacular stuff. And that's when we had to call in the big guns. Stacy and Kim's mom from Hawaii. I hope she was coming into town for other reasons. But in any event, she did the Ouija board once with us. She called some relative to the board who made it smell like roses and cologne or something. Got rid of Acre and basically told us, you're never to play with this thing again. Kim, make sure they never play with this thing again. And that's what ended our obsession with the Ouija board. So that's the basic sort of chronology that we go all non-linear on during the first third of this episode. And again, Jeff will remind us by forcing us to sort of take it back in chronological order again in the middle of the show. So there you go. I hope that is helpful to you right up front. It's funny now thinking about this stuff and remembering other things that happened that we didn't even remember during the show. So Tracey and Paul, if you're listening, hey, remember the time that we got somebody who claimed to be a Russian in Russia alive? We were playing with a Ouija board one day, and all of a sudden someone came on who claimed to be a living person in Russia. And we had a conversation with this person, but I don't remember if we tried to get a phone number or what. But then again, wasn't the Cold War going on or something? So, what are the odds of that? Anyway, if you're wondering who the voice is, predominantly on the high school Ouija board audio tapes I've dug up, that would be Stacy. She actually sounds semi-normal on tape, whereas the rest of us sound either too high-pitched or too low-pitched. The tape is very old, and so getting everything in perfect pitch, not really an option. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the sweet, sweet candy corn that is our Paratopia Halloween Ouija board special. Paratopia, welcome to the very special Halloween edition of that's right, of the show Paratopia. Yes. We've been teasing this for the better part of a year, I think, having some of my old high school pals on to talk about our Ouija board experiences, and I dug up two of them. They were kind enough to come on the show. I'll save your last names so that nobody harasses you. How about that? But here is Paul and Tracey. Say hello to the folks, and thank you for coming on the show.
Hello. Hey guys. Glad to be here.
So I was going back over our notes. Now, from 1990 to 1991, for some strange reason, we had this Ouija board obsession. And this was back before I was sophisticated enough to actually put together that, the alien abduction stuff might be related to other paranormal things. So I always sort of kept them separate, but the more I went over the notes that we took, the more crossover I'm remembering there being. And so maybe we'll get to some of that, but first, let's get into how this all started. And Tracey, was it your fault? I think it was your fault.
I'm pretty sure it was my fault, yes.
Now, I had a Ouija board, so it was
I don't
mine.
remember how this came about, but I know I had an intense interest in the supernatural from pretty much the get-go.
Yeah, you were the artsy chick in high school, right? You were like the white witch, sort of Wiccan, listening to the Smiths kind of gal.
I was studying Wicca at the time, be it white, gray, black. Yeah, I was keenly interested.
And one thing that kept coming up over and over in this bit of Ouija board dialogue is Paul being evil, Paul, somehow harming his family, Paul, don't do drugs. Very strange. What was going on with you at the time, Paul?
I was doing a lot of drugs and harming my family.
Excellent. Well, then there's one for the spirits. Literally and figuratively.
Who had control over the board, Damon? Tell me his name. Paul had control?
Well, I guess maybe, actually, let's back up, because the first question should be, did either of you move the planchet?
Planchet?
No.
The little Ouija board thing. The oracle. With your hands.
The only time I would do that was when it was kind of heavy and I was tired of lifting my arm up in that angle.
But nobody was actually, like, it's just interesting, again, in reading this stuff, because there are little, like, sort of tell signs that make it seem as though there is something oddly real going on. Like, there was one little bit of dialogue which was talking about where whatever the entity is saying that Natasha, our friend Natasha, had been moving it, which is something that we would say to be vindictive, high school kids, except that put in the caveat that she was doing it unconsciously because she wanted it to be her. She wanted to be the center of attention, and so she wasn't doing it on purpose. I find that to be a little too sophisticated for, like, narcissistic high school kids, who talk about each other behind their backs. You know what I mean?
Okay, if I may interject.
Go ahead.
We were all very narcissistic high school kids. So if any of us were moving the planchette, it would have been any of us.
That's very true. All right, so let's get back to the actual thing, because I found this fascinating, what unfolded, which was this, really a story that revolved around Tracey with some subplots that revolved around other people, like Adam. There was this one entity who kept saying, like, before Adam, and the big reveal is that it was Adam's dead brother. His mom had a son who died at birth or shortly thereafter, who she was going to name Adam. Now, nobody knew this except Adam, and I don't remember if he was on the board when this was happening. I remember saying he wasn't, but I don't actually remember whether he was or not. But I
remember him coming into play. I also remember very clearly I had my mother's boyfriend of 9 years who... he wasn't really that great to me. He had come back, and this is where Stacy comes into play. Stacy's sister Kim had experience with the supernatural and Ouija, and apparently Brian was trying to make contact. He was not in a peaceful place, and I remember Kim telling me that he needed prayers, that he needed positive thoughts. But I know that he played a role in this. He only died, I think, about 2 years previously to our sessions there.
I mean, it's a shame that Stacy couldn't make it to this, because she's on a plane to Hawaii right now, where I should be.
Of course.
Because she was claimed to be, at least, anyway, psychic, and her mom was a psychic, or claimed to be a psychic.
Right.
So they had that strain going for them. And I remember doing the Ouija board in later days with just me and Stacy, and the thing was moving so fast that I eventually just took my hands off the board, and it was just her. And so you'd say, well, it's got to be Stacy, except I don't remember her, no offense to Stacy, but I don't remember her being that literate. I don't remember her being that quick. I mean, she was a quick, smart person, but at the rate this thing was moving, I don't know that I could make words.
No, there was guaranteed it was not us controlling that.
Right.
Guaranteed.
So what do you... Well, before I get into what do you think it was, let's follow the story, because it starts off where we're talking to someone who says his name is Damon Roquet. Do you guys remember this?
Vaguely.
Yeah, I remember the second one more.
He said his name was Damon Roquet. He was born in Staple, France, a small village. He kept saying babas, which was... He kept saying it was like French slang for human. And now, thanks to the miracle of Google, I'm able to look this up, and it's actually French slang for hippie. And he was the one who kept going after Paul and saying, Baba's evil, and Paul, stop doing drugs, and Paul, you're hurting your family, and all that sort of stuff. And he would also say things like, Paul is outside, and we'd look out the window, and sure enough, Paul would be outside. And he'd say, Paul's going up the street and we'd say, for what? For cigarettes? And he'd say, cigarettes and drink. Paul's bad, all this sort of stuff. At one point, the church bells next door go off, and he says, French bells from church. And I remember asking my neighbor Dave, because his mom worked at the church. It's a Catholic church, and sure enough, they were French bells. So there are little things like that are interesting. But then he sort of turned creepy. Like he would talk about God, and he would talk about you have to pray and all of this stuff. Adam's a good guy, Paul's a bad guy, all this. And he said, Tracey tried to sort of justify being a white witch and all that. And he was saying, well, it's evil either way. It doesn't matter. Your gods are false gods, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But then he took a turn for the worst, right?
Oh, it did.
Damon, do you consider us friends? No. Acquaintances? A. L. Allies? E. Alien? I'm an alien? Damon.
Wait, Stacey, that also leaves.
No. Don't even say it. Don't give him any ideas. Damon, I'm not an alien. I'm a human being. I don't think aliens would use a Ouija board, Damon. That doesn't make sense.
Go ahead, fill us in. What happened?
What I remember most clearly from these sessions, of course, they started in your house, just outside of your bedroom door. I remember that pretty clearly. But what I remember the most would be being in Stacey's house. And we had a more formal session when we had her sister Kim hosting us, kind of overseeing us because she had experience with the matter. And she lit candles, and, she made sure it was a good environment, and, we were trying to bring in light or goodness or God or what have you. And I remember very clearly our dear friend Jeremy provoking the spirit we were talking to, challenging, questioning,
I find that hard to believe.
I mean, it's healthy to question, right? Well, this is what our teenage Jeremy was doing, was questioning this spirit, and, I didn't make it very happy. What I remember very clearly would be the cold air coming off of the Ouija board. I remember there were 2 candles that were lit by Kim, and I remember the glass breaking in the middle of the session, just out of nowhere. It just broke right in front of
Okay,
us.
so that was you who was there for that. I thought it was Stacey, and then I remembered her leaving.
Stacey was there.
But she had to go to work, right?
There were, I'm not sure, but there were multiple people there. I do remember Stacey there. I remember Kim there. I remember there were multiple others there.
Paul was there. Yeah, it was Paul and me.
But Paul, I remember that you were there, and I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, what is Jeremy doing? What I also remember very clearly was there was a radio in another room, and every time this spirit felt antagonized, challenged, whatever, the radio would go up. It was really pretty creepy. Also, they had, 4, 7, 10 cats. And they had them locked out of the room when we were doing the session, and these cats were freaking out. There was also an answering machine, and this thing was flipping on and off and on and off and making these crazy noises. There was a lot going on at this time, and it was pretty freaky.
Does that jive with what you remember, Paul?
I remember the candle, and I definitely remember the radio. It was like a clock radio, I thought. Now the years have added to this story for me anyway. And I remember that it wasn't plugged in, but that also may well be me remembering things 20 years later, oddly.
Well, I'll tell you.
Actually, I think you're right. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I remember, and I'm cheating here because I think I wrote about this in my book, so it's a little bit more fresh in my memory. And what I remember is this started because, I don't know, for some reason I played with it on my own in my house. And I got scared. So something happened. There was like heat rising from the board. I don't know. Something made me scared. I don't remember what exactly. I remember thinking that there were voices coming through my speakers, crazy schizo shit.
If I can interject just briefly here, you said that your bed was shaking. I remember that clearly.
Really? Okay.
Yes, your bed was shaking.
I don't remember
at
that.
night, multiple nights. Yes.
We can't imagine why Jeremy's haunted. I just want to get that in there because he always throws that shit in my face.
Shut up.
The douchebaggery continues.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
If his bed was shaking, there was a reason.
Yeah, well, and it wasn't women. Let's face it. So I got scared, and I remember, I think I probably called Bill Donnelly first. I called anyone I knew with a car, not home. I called Travis, and I remember getting this from hell answering machine that was like the multi-toned devil voice, like, saying, "We're not here right now, leave a message," and like angel music playing in the background. So maybe I dialed a wrong number or what, I don't know, but that freaked me out, and I like ran out of the house, and then I went back in and I called either Carrie or Scott Lima, whoever actually drove of that pair, and they brought me to Stacy's with the Ouija board. And they didn't come in because they weren't really involved in this stuff. But you guys were there. I definitely remember Paul. I remember Stacy being there for part of it and then having to go to work begrudgingly. And Kim was there. And yeah, so Kim was sort of taking control of the situation. I remember before we started, Kim had said that she had a note from her husband saying, I wish you guys would stop playing with this Ouija board because the cats are going crazy. There's no good reason for it. I remember this note about that, but I don't remember exactly the content of it, except that he blamed it on the Ouija board. And so at some point in our little playing with this board, something came on and started saying that it was Satan, it's going to kill us, swearing and all this stuff. And then I thought Paul and I, but maybe just me, I don't know, were like, yeah, right, if you're Satan, prove it. And when I said that, the radio goes on, the answering machine starts clicking, the candle holder breaks, all at the same time, and Paul and I just looked at each other and started crying.
Yeah, pretty much.
Paul, do you remember crying?
I do not remember crying.
You lie.
I am a redneck from Idaho.
Paul the punk rocker cried.
This part is cloudy for me.
But I do remember going into Stacy's room, and I remember Kim got him off the board by calling her Uncle Bobby to the board, and then said, "Uncle Bobby, while the radio's on, could you turn it to a nice station?" And through the static came "Good Day Sunshine" from the Beatles. You guys remember that?
That I remember very clearly.
Yeah. So I went into the other room to turn off the radio at some point, and I remember saying that it was unplugged, but I don't actually. I guess I struggle with that. Was it?
Well, that's what I was saying. I mean, it's been about 1 million years now, and it's like, what part of this story did I used to pick up goth club girls with, and what part was real?
Yeah. Well, I didn't have that problem. I didn't have that dilemma. So I didn't embellish for any of those reasons, but I did. I do remember saying that, but I don't remember if I just looked at it wrong. I could be wrong about that, but certainly not wrong about that sequence of boom, 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 and then the candle holder being the clincher.
The candle holder thing. What happened in front of us? It was a glass holder, and throughout my life, I still see it in my mind, and that was one of the first pieces of proof for me personally that there is a spiritual realm that exists. Mm-hmm. It's always been with me. The other thing I remember, I don't remember everybody that came and went in our group, but I remember our friend Jen, and she said at the time, while you were having your bed shaking incident, that her closet door kept opening and closing, and the poor thing was just absolutely terrified, and she wanted nothing to do with our group anymore after that, understandably.
Yeah, I do remember that, now that you're saying that. Because I remember her leaving the group because of that.
Exactly. It was just too intense. So for some reason we persisted, I was too interested and intrigued, and you were,
a goofball.
Been on provoking and also finding out answers.
What's that, Paul?
I said I got to wear those awesome robes.
Stop embellishing.
No, I remember Stacy's sister Kim's like yelled at me because I came wearing like this big robe.
Yeah. You got a lot of crap from them. A lot. I mean, I was kind of mortified while we were sitting there. I took it kind of seriously, you know. I wanted to know. And, oh, yeah, Kim and Stacy were just livid, especially Kim.
What people don't realize here is that Paul wasn't wearing anything underneath that robe. That's right. Why he got so much grief.
I was a poor child.
Well, Paul, did you believe any of it as it was going on? Or at what point did you?
It's hard to recall what I remembered or believed at that time. I did end up spending my life doing many, many drugs. So my memory's always a little spotty. I believe at the time I did believe.
Yeah, well, it's just, like, who among us would have been chastising you for drugs? You know, if it was us, even unconsciously, I just wonder where that comes from. You know?
Well, I loved them.
Yeah, but we didn't know that, or at least I didn't know that. I don't know if
Well, no, I mean, at the time, I wasn't, like, heavy into it, but that was much later.
Huh.
But,
so it was prophetic more than anything.
Well, no, I think I was definitely on that bus to begin with.
Right.
But I think at the time I did believe.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm pretty much a dyed-in-the-wool atheist now.
Mm-hmm.
So anything paranormal, I respect people who do believe in it. I just probably don't myself.
Right. Well, here's something sort of interesting, I guess. I don't remember at what point, so it's 1990, 1991. At some point, something walks into my bedroom, and, I didn't make the connection then that I do now, but I think it was the week, I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was a week that we were all supposed to be tested for some reason. I don't remember why.
Yeah, I do remember.
Do you remember why?
I remember. No, I don't remember why, but I remember the week of being tested and how terrifying it was.
Yeah, and I think that was the week that something walked into my room and was babbling at me at 3:30 in the morning or whatever, and I said, "Ma, what are you doing? Go back to bed." And thought, "This isn't your mother."
Wait a minute.
Uh-huh.
What do you mean tested? Tested in school? What are you talking about? Let's flesh that out a bit, shall we?
Well, I just tried to flesh it out. I don't remember what the test was about, but it was something.
Who was supposed to be administering it?
A Ouija board entity.
Ah, so not a school thing. This was...
No, this was something...
No, that was the final guy that we talked to, the bad one, right?
I don't remember, but there was somebody who was like, "You're going to be tested, this week." Basically, he's going to be coming to all of us.
I think it was that 4-letter name guy that we were not supposed to say his name.
That would be Baba.
Stacey's mom was like, "No, it was not."
No?
No, I don't remember the name, but out of respect for anyone who believes in that, I'm not going to say it.
Well, wait a minute. Mr. Atheist.
Yeah. I will. I just don't want anybody pissed at me for saying it.
No one's going to be pissed at you. Come on.
Acre.
That's right. ACRE, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he ended up being evil. Yeah.
Can I just point out something here that am I right in saying that the first person was Damon?
Yes, Damon Roque.
Damon Roque.
Roque.
Are any of you aware of what the name Damon means?
Demon?
No, I don't. I mean, we knew Damon means, in high school.
The definition of Damon is the one who tames or subdues.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
So did it have that effect on any of the three of you? Did you feel somewhat seduced or subdued?
Well, that was
into this?
definitely the seducer of us into the Ouija board thing. Sure.
Okay.
Because that was the first person.
Okay.
Well, that's interesting. So that I believe that experience happened that week. And I don't remember when I asked this, but I remember asking privately in my head, because I associated that with alien abductions. Yeah. For some reason, I didn't make that association with this. It was like, what this is, and what it was alien abduction type stuff. But I remember asking in my head at one point, is there, am I really an abductee, or am I deluding myself? And the board told me, no, yeah, you really are. And for evidence, check your shoulders.
Exactly. I remember that so clearly.
Yeah, and so I started doing that.
And you started doing that, and you found.
Yeah, I found an equilateral triangle on my left shoulder.
I do remember that.
Yeah, and I showed you guys the next day, and it eventually went away, but it was this red equilateral triangle.
Yes.
So what is that? I don't know. But once again, it's like not sophisticated enough to make the links, between other paranormal shit and alleged alien abduction. But let's get back to this story, because this really does revolve around you, Tracy. I mean, this is the thing that's fascinating to me. Maybe you want to narrate what actually happened, that how this thing unfolded.
Oh gosh, like I said, I remember it. My memories of high school are a bit sketchy, especially during that time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Paul. I didn't have the benefit of all that many drugs at the time, but yeah, I do remember it starting in Jeremy's house. I do remember, others coming and going. Some stayed, some did not, and we advanced to the next stage where we were sort of supervised by Stacy's sister. That's where the big thing happened for me. Personally, what I didn't mention before, my experiences at night, that week we were being, quote, tested, whatever that was all about, I experienced some really intense, I don't know if you'd call it night terrors. I don't know how to explain it. It was this it was like an electric charge that came over me at night. It's hard to explain, but yeah, it was very scary at the time, and I'm not sure what to make of it.
Did this have anything to do with the pink room?
The what?
The pink room?
Oh, the pink room.
Yeah, see, this is what I was getting at.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's great.
No.
Your mug up.
But actually, before we go to the pink room, Paul, do you have any experiences from that testing week?
If I do, I do not recall.
I remember Griffin, and he swears to this day it's true, even though he, ultimately doesn't know what to make of all of this, that a cup or a coffee mug, I guess, sort of flew across the room. And that scared the shit out of him. So I'm just throwing that out there. But, okay, let's get into the pink room, because, once again, I think this sort of evolved into a soap opera story revolving around your family, Tracy.
My grandparents had a house on 2nd Ave in Taunton, and actually it still haunts me to this day, and believe it or not, I still have dreams. 38 years old, over 20 years later, and I still have dreams about this pink room in this house. I'm not sure what happened in this pink room, but one of 4 bedrooms in this house was referred to that because most of the decor was pink, and there were flowers, and there were 2 bureaus with large mirrors, and it's really hard to explain what I felt in there, but it was a very charged energy, and it was not pleasant. I mean, even walking into the room, you felt like you were being watched. Like, something wanted to push you down the stairs, on the way out. Something happened in that room. I really don't know what, but this seemed to be where this energy, this spirit, what have you, came through. And honestly, I still can't explain it to this day, but just the thought of it still gives me chills.
Well, I remember, and then I was reading about it, because we have these semi-thorough notes, I guess, that the story was, I don't remember who the relative is of yours. Was it maybe your mom's boyfriend, or somebody had died? Right,
yes, that was Brian Hayden, actually.
Died of some drug-related thing.
Yeah, it was a cocaine overdose, actually.
And I think the thing that he wanted to say was that the room was bugged. Do you remember this? Is this ringing a bell?
Vaguely.
That there was some sort of drug deal gone awry, the room was bugged, and he was killed. Like, basically, he was saying he was killed.
He was. Actually, the legal story was, which I found out years later, was that he lived with a roommate at the time. My mother and he had broken up. And, of course, they were dealers. He was a very big dealer. And his friend, his roommate, his partner at the time, instead of, when he OD'd on cocaine and he went unconscious, basically his heartbeat stopped, the partner flushed the cocaine. They took time to flush the cocaine instead of calling 911, so he was trying to cover his own butt. So that's what happened. He basically was killed in that way.
Yeah. So, but here's the one thing I don't remember. I don't remember the resolution to all of this. Do either of you? Like, why did we stop?
I think it just sputtered out.
Just
it's either that or the Phantom of the Opera CD came out, and you became entranced by that instead. I'm just calling them a season.
Why do you remember that?
I guess I have a pretty good memory.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, as I was telling Jeff earlier, you going through these notes, I discovered all this old poetry, and it's like, it just reeks of bad. You go back over this old high school shit, and you're like, who was I? Why was I doing that? Let's put Phantom of the Opera up there.
Yeah.
So what about afterwards? Any aftermath for either of you? Now, Paul, you're saying you're an atheist, but did you ever have any other sort of paranormal experiences that you now have to deny and cover over to be an atheist?
No, honestly, I kind of wish. Okay, I will give you the first one I've had in maybe 20 years. My wife and I are buying a house, and so we went to go look at this house 2 days ago. This house was built by a crazy person. You'd walk in. There's this little tiny room with a thing that goes down into the cellar. Then there's a bathroom. Then there's this crazy person room that they built like enclave, like little inlets into, and there's shelves everywhere. And it was painted fluorescent green by a crazy person. Then there's a bathroom. It just goes on like this in a maze, and it looked like it was like a home for people or something. And then you walk upstairs, and there's this addition up top with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. There's like 5 bathrooms in this place. These people peed a lot. And and they both lead into like the empty space that used to be the roof. And I got creeped out. And I honestly haven't gotten creeped out in years. So we're still looking at buying it. But honestly, I kind of got creeped out by it. I can't express what I felt, but it just doesn't seem like a good idea. Now, that never stopped me from making decisions.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I am still looking at it, but there's a definite something wrong with that house.
I think you should buy it and make a reality show out of it.
Yeah, no.
Atheist versus ghosts.
Anything that's going to be a television production with me is going to involve dancing.
Well said. And Tracy, what have you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've always believed, since I was young. That was the beginning of my journey, was studying Wicca and all of that. I've studied quite a bit since then. Honestly, Jeremy, like I sort of touched on when we talked privately a few days ago, I've really been impressed by, your experiences and experiencing the silence. I haven't had that full experience myself, but, I've always believed in the paranormal. I've always had more of a spiritual outlook. I don't go with any one religion, but I've always been open. I can't give you really any one specific example. There have been so many in my life. But that was definitely a very interesting starting point for me, that the spiritual world is real, for sure.
Well, would you say that after that period of time that things calmed down, or no?
I would say so. For me, yeah. That particular incident happened, and I don't feel like I was haunted by then. When I think of it, I mean, it still gives me a little bit of a chill, because it was so blatantly obvious, But no, I don't think
you can't argue with it.
Yeah. No, you can't.
Jeff Ritzman?
Well, I don't even know where to start. Can I get a second here? Because
I would really love to hear your viewpoint.
Here's the thing with me, and maybe we'll leave this in the show. I couldn't get a cohesive follow out of exactly what the hell happened. So for me, I mean, this started, Tracy, because you had an interest in the paranormal or the spiritual realm or whatever you want to call it, right?
Mm-hmm. I did.
So what led you to a Ouija board first?
The gateway.
That was
potential gateway.
I mean, yeah. So that was like the first thing that popped into your head as far as that goes, is that this is something that you could get friends into, or that you could do with other people.
I own the Ouija board, so
Why
I think
not?
it was just a matter of, I have a Ouija board. Hey, everybody, let's use it.
Let's do
high school
this.
thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much, I wanted to see. I've always been curiosity killed the cat kind of attitude. So. Yeah.
Okay. And so then you sit down for the first time and you get this Damon character, who says what to you besides, Paul is out getting liquor and cigarettes. I mean, what else in that time? How did it evolve into creep factor?
When we first started out, I don't remember exactly who was there the very first time, but it was only a few of us. And then the group grew. So a few people came in and out, and then we had more and more people. And I think the more we let this spirit, what have you, in, it kind of seemed to grow in strength.
Okay.
It seemed to have a stronger connection, because I remember the I'm not sure what they call it, the handheld piece, moving faster and faster, and the air off the board, it was just like a winter chill. It's hard to deny that when you're sitting there experiencing it. You're sitting in a warm room in the middle of Jeremy's living room, and there's this cold, frigid air coming off of the board. How do you explain that?
Okay, and so as it evolved along, Damon got kind of creepy. It sounds to me like it started out to be a fairly fascinating conversation when he's telling you things that none of you can really know.
He's telling us when he was born, when he died,
right.
Where he's from.
Has anybody ever tried to look this guy up in any cohesive way, or is that not been in the cards?
I have.
I mean, do you have an accurate spelling for this? I mean,
Yeah.
No, I mean, since the internet. I mean, is anybody?
Yeah, I did even right before the show, and how do you find a guy who was born in 18 something and died in, I guess it was 1942?
Okay.
It's pretty impossible. But I mean, so the only thing I can validate is that there is such a name as Damon Roquet. Other people have it. There is a village called Staple, France. There's also Staples, France.
Okay.
That's really all, in French slang. Babas is French slang for hippie.
Huh. Okay. So at what point did he get creepy? At what point were you like, okay, this doesn't feel right anymore? Because obviously this was fun for that part of the interaction.
It never took long.
It never
took
long.
very long at all. I mean, that first conversation was fun, but then once it went sour the first time, it was always sour.
Uh-huh.
Do you know anybody else's name? No. How do you know Adam? A. C.
Acre? Are you a friend of Acre's?
Oh, friends.
Well, no. Bobby and Brian didn't know him.
Is Acre with you right now, Damon? No. Are you by yourself? You won't tell me. Hold on, Damon.
Who is it?
Me.
Come in.
Okay.
I
guess
the
it's
physical phenomena started happening for everybody.
And that was when you would say it turned black.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
because at some point we brought it to Stacy's so that, because her mom was a psychic, right? And so her sister Kim sort of knew, or at least said she knew stuff about this. So it was kind of like, we're going to bring this problem to Kim, and she's going to solve it for us. She's going to exorcise this demon or whatever by bringing her Uncle Bobby to the board and asking him about it and, sort of finding out what this thing really is.
And so really that was the next person that came along was this girl's dead uncle, right?
I don't know. I don't know how many sessions we had in between there where we just were talking to allegedly other things.
So you did this a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How many times would you say?
I don't know.
Quite a few.
Take a wild stab.
I mean...
20?
No,
Yeah.
Seriously, maybe, like, serious sessions, 12.
Okay.
Formal sessions would be less than that, but yeah, actual sessions,
Agreed.
Definitely 15 to 20.
Okay. Did anybody ever become physically ill, either before or after?
Only with my night chills. Whatever. I still can't really explain that. It was just this bizarre energy that came over me, and I felt completely paralyzed. It wasn't positive. It was negative. But aside from that, no. I think, Jeremy, you had more things going on with you physically than anybody.
I don't remember getting sick.
I mean, like fever, possible pneumonia, that sort of thing.
Well, I'm surprised you don't remember the bed shaking thing, because that really scared the crap out of you. And it scared the crap out of me when you told me about it.
Paul, sick?
Not to my knowledge.
Well, here's where it gets uncomfortable. Jeremy, during this period, what was going on away from all of the paranormal stuff?
That's not really uncomfortable. I don't know. I don't think anything spectacular was going on.
Any poignant life changes during this point, or
no? I mean, puberty.
Anything like that?
Puberty is always
there's always that. That's
the only thing I can think of is maybe my sister going to college.
Okay.
Other than that, I mean, childhood. I think my teen years were pretty. I was pretty depressed and mopey by nature, anyway.
Okay. And what kind of person were you in high school? I mean, as far as, is there a stereotype that we can stick to you and say that was that guy?
Ask them. I don't know.
Tracy, who was he?
I would say you were a bit of an outsider, a bit of a loner. I would say out of everybody that I knew at that time, you were definitely a unique character. You had, I remember your room very clearly. I remember the Michael Jackson poster. I remember you had a shelf of books by Whitley Strieber, one of them being Communion, and this was all new to me. So I remember picking up your books, looking at them, and, reading the covers and being very intrigued. But there was definitely a deeper side to Jeremy that I never really knew, and I don't think we talked about too much. Okay. But yeah, you were definitely a bit of a loner.
Okay. And I take it that Paul was probably the guy with the leather jackets and millions of dead cops painted on the back, and that sort of thing, right?
I was an obnoxious jerk when I was younger. I was terrible.
He was, but let me tell you, he had the charisma to back it up, so everybody loved him. For the most part.
That's true.
Yeah. But I was just I was a terrible person and a jerk, and I had fun though.
Yeah.
So Paul, what was during this period where all this stuff is going on? What's going on in your wild and sordid world at that point?
Oh,
I mean anything. And when I say that, I mean anything like out of the ordinary, like life-changing events or people dying.
Yeah, I had just switched from a Catholic high school to a public high school.
Okay.
The Catholic one was very oppressed. And then I got to this public high school, and it was on. And I got myself a leather jacket, and it was just on. So everything was changing for me.
Okay. And Tracy, what about you? Were you pretty? I don't know. Were you in a stable life place at that point, or not? I mean, am I right in saying that it was your mom's boyfriend who overdosed?
It was my mom's boyfriend. He had lived with us for 9 years, and he died when I was 13. At the time in high school, something I've never really talked about with many people aside from those who are close to me now is my mom was dealing with severe alcoholism at the time. So I was pretty much on my own at that period. I was going through a difficult time.
So you would say that your life was fairly anti-structural, for lack of a better way to put it. You pretty much took care of yourself.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. Okay. My grandparents, they lived in a duplex across from me, and, they were there for me when I went there, but I didn't always go there. Okay. Yeah, I was a bit of a free spirit even as a teen.
Right. Okay, so I mean, Jeremy, it sounds like to me that you would probably be the most structured. God, I can't believe I'm saying that. Of the three people that I'm talking to here, Jeremy seems to be the most structured in life, I guess. At that point.
Amazingly, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, the only thing that I can think of for that would be, my parents were divorced, and my mom would go to her boyfriend's house and just leave me with money for the weekend, pretty much every weekend.
Oh, okay.
So that feeling of abandonment, and I remember thinking back then that it was stupid, because, why should she trust me, a high school kid, to just not destroy the place and all that? But for some reason she could, and she was, correct.
So you probably weren't.
Tracey TP'd your house.
well, there's that.
And so you probably weren't in a regular sleep pattern. You were probably staying up late, doing everything that mom probably wouldn't put up with, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I spent one summer, probably that summer, at Stacy's because her sister had gotten married and went away on a honeymoon and all this. So yeah, I mean, we were all pretty free that way. We all had really shitty parents that way that worked to our advantage.
And I know Stacy's not here, but what do you guys know about what was going on in her life at that point? Was her in life in any kind of upheaval at all? Or
Oh yeah, no, she was batshit.
Her mom, was in Hawaii.
I mean, then I could say the same thing as I did when we talked to Alta and Chad Dillard here. Jeremy, no shit.
Well, yeah, I'm not arguing the point of no shit. I just didn't. I'm saying back then, of course, in high school, I didn't know enough to put this all together.
Well, of course not. No, I mean, I don't think any of us did until or you and I did until we started doing this show and we started talking about all this stuff. But Tracey and Paul, I mean, what kind of has come to fruition for this show is that anytime that you see people who have they live in this kind of an unstable, out of routine, anti-structured life where there's either change, like Paul, you were going from this really oppressive school to being footloose, that's a huge upheaval right there. And Tracey, you being kind of left to raise yourself and not really having any structured rules and that sort of thing, that again is kind of what follows. It's like what surrounds paranormal events, since we can't define what they are, what surrounds them, and that seems to surround them. This anti-structured, just out of routine lifestyle is what seems to surround those things. It doesn't mean we know what it is, but that seems to be a constant. I mean, I still live my life like a freaking frat party without the drinking, but I do what I want when I want. I stay up as late as I want. And I'm infested with junk like this. So when the big event happened where things were breaking and radios were playing that may or may not have been plugged in and all of that, after this was all over and it kind of fizzled. Now, this is the big question. Did it fizzle, or did that event go, okay, what the fuck, enough, and you all backed away? So that's I'm sorry?
What I remember, Stacy's mom put an end to it.
Mm.
She strictly forbade us to do it anymore.
Hmm.
She put her foot down and she said no.
Yeah.
I vividly remember this.
And Stacy's mom was the psychic.
Yes.
Stacy's mom was a psychic, and she was involved with, call it white light, call it, positive, good, what have you. But, I mean, she was very familiar with paranormal. And, yes, she did put her foot down.
Yeah, once we pulled up Acre, that was it. She said we were done.
Now, she came into, she lived in Hawaii at the time, and she came into town.
Okay.
Did this once with us, I guess, right? And then that was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was when...
And she told Kim we are not allowed to do it anymore. And from what I recall, Kim stuck to her guns.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Did, at any point when you were doing this, I mean, being as she was so familiar with this stuff, I mean, at any point did she make you burn, like, frankincense or myrrh or anything like that was like a protective, element to it? Anything like that?
I remember.
Interesting. Stacy's sister, Kim, had me burning white candles around the clock.
I remember Natasha using holy oil to make crosses in the corner of, each corner of the room anytime she played.
Huh. I mean, that's, with a Ouija board, that's kind of been my only real experience with it that I can ask an educated question here. Is like, the part where I was asking about being sick. That was, for me, that was one of the most pointed things that I got out of it. Is my wife, my future wife at the time, she was, I don't even think we were engaged at the time, but, we fooled around with one night, laughing and playing and not even thinking anything about it. Like, this is just a goof, right? And I'd say within 24 hours, I was probably one of the sickest I'd ever been in my life. And upon reading a book some months later by who, Jeremy, again?
Stoker Hunt.
That would be, yes, that's right.
You like saying that fast, right?
I'm going to take that. One of the things that was written in this book was that it lowers your immune system. And whether or not it's simply a tool for like facilitating automatism or not, that's one of the things that it does. And so that's why I asked if anyone got sick. But the other time that we did mess with it, we were told by, again, a lady who was a self-proclaimed witch. She owned a store down in Baltimore City. She said, if you're going to mess with that thing, you better burn some myrrh. And I have some here, and take it with you, put it in the burner, and fire it up before you even touch it. And we did, and all that we got that night was, and when Jeremy was here at my house visiting me, he said, at points the planchette was moving so fast under your fingers that it was literally moving out from under your fingers. We had much that same type of thing, except it kept saying no, and literally almost going off the board, pointing to the myrrh burning in this little pot. No, over and over, no this, no this, no this. And to that end, we would not put it out, and it just stopped moving. So that's been my only real experience with it. I mean, the only thing that any parapsychologist or scientist will tell you is that, it only facilitates automatism, which is involuntary muscle movements that are making it move. So you don't know you're moving it, but you are moving it. I've not found that in my case to be true.
No, not
especially
at all.
not watching it moving out from underneath both of our hands at the same time.
At an intense speed, I might add. I mean, it just wasn't possible for any of us to move it like that.
Well, I don't know if you guys remember this, but I think it was when Kim's mom was there, calling someone to the board, and we all smelled roses. Do you remember that? We all smelled like this perfume.
I actually kind of do.
Something positive.
Yeah.
He did.
So I don't know how that would happen.
That.
I mean, or like the cold that you were talking about before. I mean,
yeah.
There are certain effects that
she could have had a rose pack hidden in her shoe.
That's true. Could have had that candle holder rigged.
Well, I mean, besides the aftermath of this, I mean, have either of you had any kind of, I mean, Paul, you already said not really anything has gone on with you over the years. But Tracey, what about you? I mean, you seem like you've got you've still got kind of interest in this, and I'm curious if you've been, if you've experienced anything else, maybe, and it doesn't have to be anything that you can directly put your finger on. I mean, I'm talking any weird instance in your life that you look back on and go, I just don't have an answer for that.
Oh yeah, my whole life is kind of revolved around the paranormal, not to the extent of, you and Jeremy were kind of pursuing it professionally, really looking for answers, but I've been, in my experiences, I've been forced to remain open because I've had so many different experiences that just, even if I didn't want to believe, I'm constantly getting slaps upside the head that said, no, we're here, we exist, there is a spiritual realm, and, it's all around you. So even if I wanted to be an atheist, there's just been so much that's happened in my life. I've taken the time in my 20s. I researched all kinds of different religions. I found what I liked out of man-made religion and kind of developed my own philosophy over the years. But suffice it to say, I've had a lot of experiences, and I know the spiritual realm is real.
Would you say that the Ouija board was the most potent, or would you say you've had more potent experiences since that?
I've had more potent experiences since that, but that was, at that time, during my teens, that was a huge eye-opener for me. I mean, you can't really deny seeing glass break in front of you.
Right.
You can't deny that. There's no way that could have happened.
Mm.
So, unless I had blocked it out of my memory, there's no way that I could just say that didn't happen.
Right. How would you feel about relaying your most potent to us?
I've read a bit about Jeremy's experiences. Now, I have not read any of your books. I've wanted to read Jeremy's books. I just haven't. And when he talks about the silence, I think I've experienced it somewhat, but not completely. In my 20s, when I didn't have to work, when I was able to commit myself, I was able to get involved with meditation, spiritual study, and it changed me. It changed me quite a bit. I think my life pretty much has revolved around the paranormal and spirituality. And it's difficult for me to maintain a life, in the physical world because, I have to earn a paycheck and, I have to, deal with people. But at the same time, that's just who I am, and I've come to accept it.
And so the silence thing would be one of your more potent realizations, I guess, of something.
I would say so. I've had several experiences in the past where it's very hard to explain. It's very hard to talk about, but you just come to this point where you just know. You tap into something that's just, it's everything. It's who we are. It's where we're from. It's you just know. It's very difficult to talk about, though. But
yeah. Do you know what your ancestry? I'm just curious if you know what your ancestry is.
My ancestry?
Yeah.
Oh, it comes from all over. I have Italian, I have Polish, I have French Canadian.
Okay.
And a little bit of Cherokee Indian in there, too.
Okay. Paul, what about you?
French Canadian, Irish, and German.
Yeah. Well, that makes somewhat sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, don't just say that and then not tell them what that means.
Yeah, what the hell are you talking about,
Jeff? It's one of those. At least for me, and I get called down a lot for this, but I find it over and over and over that when you ask people who've had paranormal experiences, either their whole life or maybe have just had one really severe bout of paranormal activity in their life, that you find that they are Irish, German, some Celtic, definitely American Indian figures in there too, a little bit. Usually it's also that another consistency is above average IQ.
Yeah.
And that's another big one that seems to pop up over and over and over. I don't know what they mean. I've been told that that's strictly the circles that I found myself in, and that's not indicative of everyone. And frankly, some of the other theories tend to bear that out when you talk about, the other part of this that I find interesting is you were all adolescent kids, all in this transformative state as to growing into the people that you are now. But major upheaval pretty much across the board. Jeremy, Stacy, Tracey, Paul, all of you across the board. So I'd say that was ripe for something. But in addition to all that, you're looking for it. And that immediately throws it into a marginal category. Well, they were looking for this. They're using a freaking Ouija board. What do you want? Well, that's kind of part of it too, is because the paranormal seems to have an escape hatch, which is you're not going to explain me because I'm going to put something in your road that's going to completely thwart what you're after. And what you're after is an explanation as to why this happened or through what channels did this happen. And the answer is, I'm just going to say the four that I know. The four adolescents here, are all going through this transformative time in their life, and they're impressionable, and they're looking. And so that immediately throws you in a marginal category, which is another consistency.
I completely agree. We were all misfits, for sure. And we were definitely feeding off of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Almost to the point of hysteria at times for this.
Mm.
But definitely feeding off of and into each other.
Do you think, or either of you think, that what you experienced may have been caused by you rather than some external force?
No.
Definitely external.
To this day, I cannot explain. And I've come to terms with it by just accepting that some things I will never be able to explain. And that's okay.
Would you ever mess with a Ouija board again?
Sure.
I think we've got a reunion in the making here, Sheriff.
Well, here's a question within that, Jeff, which is, do you think that, I mean, like you said, at times we had a large group, and it sort of weaned its way down to a core group. What do you think that weaning process was based on? Do you think that was based on anti-structure? Were those people more stable than we were?
Well, it's picking out the people that will most accurately be the conduit. I mean, don't we see that? I mean, Jeremy and I have seen that kind of thing in just in our circle of friends in ufology. I mean, just that alone. I've said to him before, you don't meet people by accident. I'm not one of these people that believes that, it's just happenstance that we meet certain people. As recently as the last live show that we did, we had somebody call in who was on hold who just wanted to listen. And we end up answering the phone, and this guy has had an experience with a being that I've seen before as well. And it was just completely out of the norm of what I think most people would even think about when they talk paranormal stuff. I don't think anything happens for an accident. I think you all were supposed to be there. And I think anything that was, like if the other kids were a little bit more grounded in a home life or stability or whatever, either they wouldn't be drawn into it, or it selected down and boiled you all down into that conduit that was the most conducive to it manifesting itself, if that makes sense. And again, that's just speculation on my part, but it seems to be the way it works. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I'd have to agree there, especially some of the few, I mentioned our friend Jem there. She came in and, she was just one of many examples, but, she quickly got scared away with some phenomena happening to her. She just apparently wasn't meant to be part of the group. I think that happened with multiple people.
Mm-hmm. Any ghost sightings for you, Paul, or nothing really, like not anything even remotely like that? I mean, have you seen a ghost or?
I have not, and ever since. I mean, Jeremy influenced my life quite a bit. Just his way of thought, and I'm always looking to the skies, and I'm always looking around corners.
I've made you paranoid. You're welcome.
No, and not not in a bad way. Just sort of. I just remember your fervor. Let's put it that way. And I think I was always jealous of that in a way, because I can never hold on to a concrete thought for more than 10 minutes. But I've always looked, but I've never found. I've been in covens. I've been in many situations where, if it were to present itself, it would have. And I just, to this day, I've never had an experience like. And it was not for lack of searching.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. And Tracy, what about you? Any ghost stuff at all for you?
Like I said, my life has kind of revolved around the paranormal. And professionally, no, but my personal interest, I've always known, for me personally, that, it's real. As far as finding truth, I take things with a grain of salt, but, I know the spiritual realm is, it's a concrete thing for me, for where I am in my life.
So I'm curious with you, Tracy, what sparked you in that direction in the first place, way back all those years ago? What was the first thing that kind of made you cock your head and go, what is that about? I mean, because I don't necessarily think that kids just automatically take a severe interest in that like you have. And you still have to this day. It still affects what you think and your life. What was the one thing that kind of pushed you to that?
I think at some point it's because I started getting confirmation. It started so young. I mean, it's pretty much like I was born with an interest or awareness of, spiritual and supernatural. I even remember being a newborn, apparently. I remember the what do you call it? The bassinet that I was put in, and I was able to recall the details to, my family, and they were like, how do you remember that? Anyway, throughout the years, I've just had experiences, even dreams, foreshadowing dreams. Even before I entered Taunton High, the high school, I had a dream about the school. I had never seen it before, and, I had a clear visual of what it was like, just things like that. And, throughout the years, there have been a few people I've been able to talk to about these things, but of course, this day and age, things have changed. And you can be open about this without seeming so crazy, but, I mean, since I was young, I've always felt a connection with the spiritual world. I actually spent time... Sorry, go ahead.
No, and so this was what this whole Ouija board thing was basically you looking for it to confirm itself to you.
Yeah, I was looking for answers. I was looking. I was searching, and I definitely found something there.
Yeah.
For sure. Hard to deny that.
And Jeremy, what the hell were you looking for?
I don't know. I mean, I remember me and Griffin being the two wise asses who would just sort of sit back and laugh at everything until this thing would get angry.
He was such a wise ass, and he would piss it off, and whenever he would say something would happen. The radio would turn up, or that's when the glass broke, or, Jeremy had a knack. This thing responded to him right away.
It was love at first sight.
S-T. Stop. Jeremy, stop it.
Thanks, Steve. Jerry, stop. It's not a toy, you know that much.
So not much has changed then for you, Jeremy. I mean,
now I've switched from pissing off the paranormal to pissing off the paranormal researchers. That's
well, I'll just point out to the two of you that Jeremy and I did a ghost investigation in Gettysburg, and I forget what you did, Jeremy, but we were upstairs and you said something about. So we hear you had a kid that kicked off. What's that all about? And it was something about the woman who used to live there lost 3 children. And I was like, yeah, that's a great way to start, Jer. Thanks. So
I do want to mention the timing of this reconnection and that house thing tells me I'm not going to get that house.
Well, once again,
I'm being dead serious on this one. I actually haven't felt creeped out by something for years and years and years and years. And my intuition has always been pretty good, but just the timing between this and that, maybe that says something.
Well, it's one thing that does come up in terms of anti-structure is when you're moving. When you're moving, stuff seems to happen. That's when people see ghosts and things like that. And as you're talking about that, I wonder if it's not simply that sort of your palette is clear, and so you haven't blocked out whatever's in the environment around you just yet because it's so new. So if you go into that house that you're unfamiliar with, then maybe you're open to the environment and you're feeling what's actually there. But if you give it time and you put on the HD TV, Paul, you'll be fine. It'll be blocked out and you won't have any problems.
At least for 6 months.
And that's when the killing begins.
Talk to me after 6 months that you've been there.
Why is that that's the magic number for you?
Well, it was for me at least, yeah. 6 months to the day. No, I mean, I find it all really curious that that what really should have only been. I mean, what kid back then, or even back as far as the 70s, what group of kids didn't get together at a slumber party or a sleepover and mess with a Ouija board? And yet, you don't hear this kind of story being all that prevalent. And yet, with you guys, it became, obsessive, I would say, at a point where you were doing it so much. And that, I guess that's kind of my last question is, what was the obsession about? Was it just because it was interesting and creepy and everybody or was it more about gathering people together and hanging out? Is that kind of where the draw was for that? Or was it really just this, you became literally transfixed on this thing?
we were screamingly obsessed. We didn't talk about anything else. We didn't. I remember not thinking about much else. For me, anyway, it was all encompassing.
Tracy, same thing.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was just completely transfixed on it. It was questioning. It was searching. You know.
Mm.
I mean, the social part was great, but that really, wasn't entirely what it was all about at all.
Well, what's funny is that we were socially a really tight-knit group anyway. Like, that would have worked itself out. We were tight before that, so I don't really think that played a part. I really think what kept us on the line was the fact that there was a plot that was unfolding that had a real narrative structure.
Going. Yeah.
And we wanted to see where it was going, and it was it kept us on the line that way. It's like it kept trying to say something, and it was almost getting there, and then it just couldn't quite get there, and then, and then it did, and then it ended up being this thing about, Tracy's mom's boyfriend.
Ah. And so it led you with a dangling carrot up until the end, and the end was when the glass broke, and
well, no, the end.
And it's it said it was going to kill you.
No, the end was when, as I said, when Stacy's mom came into town. We did this thing once, and that was it. And she was like, "You guys are done. No talking to this Aker.
Yeah.
He's bad."
She said that we opened the door. That it was just a negative energy. It was just too much.
Damon, do you know Dolores is my mother? Why? Oh, you? Yes, she's my mother.
No, he meant you. You. Dolores is you.
Dolores is not me, Damon. No. I'm her daughter. Why do you think I'm Dolores? Because of my gift. Damon, do you know my name? It's not Dolores. That's my mother.
And what if anything did this I'm not going to say the word, the A word. What did he have to say that was so bizarre and evil that she kind of put the hammer down on it?
I think he was right. Tell me if I'm remembering this incorrectly. He was pretending to be Damon Roquet. He was pretending to be the guy who broke the candle. He was pretending to be all of these various things. He was sort of the all-purpose devil.
Huh.
I recall that to be true, and I also recall when Stacy's mom pulled up her brother or whatever it was, he was like, "Oh no, as far as the one we were talking to goes."
Right.
Now here's the question again: do you know what Aker means?
No, that I can't figure out.
Aker was one of the earliest gods worshipped and was the deification of the horizon. There are strong indications that Aker was worshipped before other known Egyptian gods of the earth, such as Geb. Aker also means one who curves, because it was perceived that the horizon bends all around us.
Wow.
So, if you read on with this, Aker often became referred to as Rudi, the Egyptian word meaning two lions, but it's horizon, which that brings a secret smile to my face because you all were on a horizon, and of that age, of that time in your lives and all of that. So that's kind of interesting that it would be that kind of definition attached to that thing. And frankly, how do you know that you weren't always talking to that particular entity? For lack of a better way to put it, you really don't know, because there's no visual there and there's no real signpost or landmark to really gauge, like, who was Damon, who was somebody's dead uncle, et cetera, et cetera. It could have always been this thing. And to me, that seems to be almost a hallmark of the paranormal too, is that there's certain things that can't hide what they are. Like the mask only stays on for so long and then it drops it and there may be another one, or you may get a look at, what is something really presenting to you. So, but I find the idea that horizon is in there is pretty interesting. So fascinating.
Yeah. And here's something, I don't know if you guys knew about this or remember this, but I played once just with Stacy. This was the time that it went so fast that I had to take my hands off, and that was an entity claiming to be God. So you'll enjoy that. And the only thing I really remember this God saying was telling me that when I was a kid, I had told my neighbor Dave. Oh, this was when I had asked it for proof, and it said, "You remember telling your neighbor Dave the squeakiest wheel always gets the oil?" Which I didn't, but it sounded good, so yeah. Here's what's sort of interesting about it was when we started, I wanted to turn on the tape recorder, and he said, "No tape recorder, this isn't about that. This is for you only. This isn't about proof or anything like that." Yeah. And then I tried to secretly put on the tape recorder, and it told me not to fuck with it. And then I wanted to write it down, and it wouldn't let me do that either. So I don't know what to make of that, but I remember that being, I remember the emotion of it being pretty fascinating and challenging in that it was making so many definite statements about things that it was, it's hard to argue the point. Yeah. Except that I wonder if we got Stacy's mom on the line, that it would be like, "No, I make her too. Just kidding." But Acre was a god, right? So
yes.
Can you tell me anything about my mother? Since you know her so well.
Or just say about Dolores.
Can you tell me anything about myself, Damon? P.O.
Power.
Yes. Anything else? P. O. A. U. L. C. Paul is coming soon, yes. H. E. D. I. E. He dies? No, he doesn't. I won't let it happen.
But Jeremy, you said that you had played with it alone one time?
Yeah, I played with it alone. I tried. And that was when I remember heat rising from the board, and I had these amplified speakers, which were notoriously shitty, and so they turned to static really quick. And I thought, this is before White Noise, the movie, or any of that stuff that I, had heard later about voices coming in through the static. But for some reason, I thought voices were coming in through the static, and heat was definitely rising off the board. And so I just put it down and made some calls and got to Stacy's, and that was the day that the candle holder broke.
Ah, okay. Huh.
That's interesting. We've always had, whenever things got really serious with the group sessions, it was always very cold air coming from the board, so I wonder what the difference is with the heat.
I don't know, but I remember being chastised by Kim because you're never supposed to play with the Ouija board alone. And,
yeah.
Right. But I just thought, like,
that.
why? That doesn't make any sense to me, so I'm going to give it a shot.
Wow. And well, don't you find it curious that you felt heat coming off of it, and that was the day where the thing broke and there was cold air coming off of it. So that equaled, you having it alone equaled to the day that scared the shit out of everybody, point blank.
Right. What are you making out of that?
I'm wondering if you charged it up.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, the whole point of bringing it to Stacy's was to have Kim get whatever this was off the board. Because I was under the assumption that I had called something on, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and now it was stuck there, and I didn't want it in my house.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah, she was trying to help us close the door that we had ignorantly opened.
Wow. You guys should make a movie and call it The Craft 2 or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. Crap.
The Craft. Yes. Well, Jeremy.
Yes, Jeff.
I don't...
No further questions?
I don't know what else you could do here.
The defense rests.
Yeah.
Wow. Except for that crying part, I really don't remember that.
I remember that. I remember us both looking at each other and breaking down because we were scared. And I was like, holy shit, Paul the punk rocker is crying. This must be bad news.
Yeah, no, that's gone.
But everybody's still around, so obviously it didn't make good on its promise. So
that's right. Can't keep a good man.
Yeah, but now there's a reconnection. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and you're all talking and focusing on it again.
Well,
Yeah.
here was the other thing. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I just saw this in reading, and this will be another well, no shit. When it was Damon Roquet, the way it had us call it to the board was to say its name 3 times. And now you look at it, it's like Bloody
true.
Mary.
Wow.
So it's like you have to invoke it, you know?
Yeah, I can't get over. If there was ever a Sakatumi moment. I mean, you guys were like right in it. You're obsessed with it. Anti-structure, adolescence. I mean, God, it's like it should be in a textbook somewhere. It's just, it's crazy. I mean, you hear these kind of stories from people. Like like I said, we had Chad and Alta Dillard on, and somebody's mother or stepmother was a white witch, and they were living in New Orleans and moving about everywhere, very anti-structured life.
Yeah, they were living above a voodoo
priestess.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no shit, really, you're seeing ghosts, and you're having all these weird experiences. I can't imagine why. And it's like I've heard. I mean, Jeremy's told me this story before about the thing breaking, not really about a lot about the people involved, a little bit. But now when you get the whole unfolding of this through you two, it's like now I'm seeing where, okay, yeah, all the hallmarks are there. You say all the hallmarks are there, but you don't know what the hell the hallmarks would mean. They're not an answer, but certainly everything that was surrounding you guys at the time, seems to have just been like the perfect storm for something like that to happen. And so it's fascinating as hell to me, but at the same time, it's like not a big surprise.
Well, can I ask you guys a selfish question before you go?
Sure.
Yeah.
As far as the alien abduction stuff goes, when do you remember me talking about that? I mean, was I vocal about it or no?
The time I knew you consistently.
Really?
Yes.
And what do you remember? What the gist of it was?
You were very freaked out. You got pulled out of your room. I remember something about stars. Something happened to your Michael Jackson poster.
This is a good one.
Serious. This is because I remember you telling me about this because you were very, 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 very freaked out.
What happened to the Michael Jackson poster?
I don't remember.
Huh.
They were all blowing or something like that. And you didn't want to go back in your room. And then later came the triangle. But I recall the alien stuff before all this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly had the UFO sighting in 8th grade, and then I remember having first-person flashback-type dreams. But I'm pretty sure that thing walked into my room that week of Hell Week.
Okay, it very well could have, but it was something that was consistently going on with you.
Yeah, well, which is why I associate it with the other stuff. But Tracy, did I ever talk to you about it?
You didn't talk to me personally, per se, but I remember very, very clearly you talking about the triangles on your back and also other marks, not just triangles, but maybe scratch marks on your back, but they were very, how would you say, in formation. It wasn't like somebody took their nails and scratched your back, or you did it even. It was very specific, very precise markings on your back, even aside from the triangles. Yeah, you were going through a very difficult time. You were having a lot of anxiety, and you were really freaked out. I remember that. And this came along with, the time of the bed shaking.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Isn't it amazing, audience, how Jeremy gets benign triangles and I get flogged? I mean,
as it should be.
Like, really?
Yes.
I was reading on CNN today.
Uh-huh.
They have a pretty interesting article about how they can recreate alien abductions now by putting you into a certain REM sleep. It's either that or CNN.com, but CNN or MSNBC. But they say they can recreate it now by taking people and putting them in out-of-body experiences.
Yes, and hopefully that man will be a guest on this program in the near distant weeks.
I just I don't understand how that's making the rounds as quickly as it is, and nobody's jumping up and going, "Wait a minute, we proved out-of-body experiences exist."
I know. yeah.
I mean, I looked at that test, and one of the things that they said that they do is they instruct people, if they find themselves lucid dreaming, to go back into their body to have an out-of-body experience, to turn that lucid dream into an out-of-body experience. And I read this and I go, you know what? This is not proven. You can't tell me that you know that these people aren't just dreaming everything. Like, what is an out-of-body experience at that point? Part of the lucid dream?
I'm sorry, it was on the internet.
I stand corrected, sir.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for coming on the show and coming on longer than we'd asked you to come on.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vaeni and Jeff.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
This is Mark Nesbitt. I wrote The Ghosts of Gettysburg. You are listening to Paratopia with Jeff and Jeremy.
We're back with Ouija Board, Volume 1, Number 4. This is your mediator, Jeremy Vaeni speaking. Shall we go into the letter?
Yeah, Jeremy, shut up.
Ouija Board, Volume 1.
Damon, are you there?
So the Jeff.
And so the Jer.
It begins. What did you make of that clusterfuck?
No shit.
Yes, that seems to be your mantra.
Yeah.
I make a lot more sense now, don't I?
Well, I mean, certainly, if you're looking for something or a story to fit the, the general consensus of anti-structure and marginality and all of that, it's all right there. I mean, like I said, I think you all were very ripe at that time. Especially make note of the amount of attention paid to it in that Paul said that it became an obsessive thing. And you all know what I think. I think that is a prerequisite for really major events in the paranormal realm. So I think you were ripe for it. And I think it definitely did what it was going to do based on that. I have to wonder how much fear was involved with you and with Tracey and Paul. Like you and Paul cried when it said it was going to kill you. I find the hook is thrown out, you bite the hook, it reels you in, and as it gets closer, you figure out there's no man on the end of that reel. It's something else. And that seems to be like a kind of a familiar thematic throughout all this stuff as well.
Something Paul wrote to me after the show. He said, I forgot to ask one question. What does it all mean? What does it all mean?
That's not a very productive question to ask.
Why? Well, I mean, if what does it all mean? You could only say personally, I think, what it all means. I don't think the story arc itself means anything unless we've revealed, in fact, who killed who, like the game of Clue.
Right.
But if not that, then there's a subjective element. What did it mean to Tracey? Well, to her, this was the big wake-up call that there's a tangibility to spiritual stuff,
right,
that she then went on to explore in her life. I don't know. I mean, what did it mean to you? I guess that's sort of the question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately, it's interesting because if he's an atheist, he says that at the beginning, but then the more he gets to talking about it, it's like, well, I'm an atheist because I am burying this.
Right, yeah.
Because clearly you do believe that this was something outside of us. You said it. So
right.
What does that mean? What does that imply?
What did it mean to you?
Well, I think it means more now than it did then. I mean, I was... Like I said, me and Griffin were the two sort of skeptics and joking and cynical and all that.
Uh-huh.
Probably up until the point of crying, up until the day of like real tangibility. But I think it means more now, looking back, simply because making a connection between the abduction phenomenon and this stuff, I see more threads than I, of course, did then, or even prior to today, prior to looking back on, oh yeah, the thing about, finding marks on my body, and there are marks, and relating that to the UFO thing, or the abduction thing. Hearing about my bed shake and that sort of thing. I mean, all that stuff is just so interconnected that it makes more sense to me now. Maybe then what it meant to me, maybe I'm overlooking the fact that night that thing walked into my room, and I thought, this isn't your mother, you know what this is. Deal with it. And even the next thing that I remember happening, of my door opening and then having, another abduction-like situation happen, and then after that situation, at some point in the morning right before waking up, having a dream about the time that something walked into my room, and I thought, this isn't your mother, you know what this is. And in that dream, I'm asking everybody in school, I'm asking my friend Bill, hey, were you in my room last night? All of this stuff, and it's preposterous, and I felt as though there was somebody looking at me dreaming this and going, hey, idiot, this is stupid. It's that smarmy smile, behind the dream going, you know what this is. It's not your mother. It's not your friends. And the thing that I know that it is aliens. So once again, it's that contrast. I guess what I'm getting to is that maybe the thing that's important that I'm not really examining is that even though it's all interconnected, the trump card is always this alien thing. Like the Ouija board stuff, that's one thing. And somehow it's interconnected. But if you're going to look at like the hierarchy of intelligence at work here, that trumps this for whatever reason. Maybe this Ouija board stuff is an outcrop of that. And whatever that is. I mean, obviously I don't believe it's aliens anymore. But anyway, something along those lines.
Would you say that that there are certain things in the paranormal world that are not meant to be diddled with, namely that Ouija board?
I don't believe in that. And to my detriment, obviously. I mean, you think you're thick.
Right.
Maybe, unless you've got certain circumstances, it's hard to answer. I mean, because I guess I'll answer it this way. From the way that we are now, maybe that's true. But I think, the oneness experience, I mean, if we were all opened up that way, then would something like this take on a completely different context? Where it would be, an outcropping of us in some way.
Well, see, that's what I think. I go the parapsychological route with this one, and I say that the Ouija board is a tool that facilitates automatism. And out of that's not to say that it's not either A, useful, or B, dangerous. You can take your pick either way, because it can be either. But in facilitating that, it's facilitating something else, not only in the way of involuntary muscle movements and all that. And I understand that it moved too fast to be any one of you to be doing it and that sort of thing. I'm not saying that was involuntary muscle movement, but it facilitates something else. I mean, it gets the brain into that mode that perhaps allows some things to happen or something to manifest. And so I think it starts out benign enough. But ultimately, when you talk about the radio coming on, the radio playing a particular song, glass breaking, all of those things, I think fundamentally, it's just my opinion, I think fundamentally that was all of you. I think that was all of you collectively doing that. I think you brought about that reality because you became obsessed with the Ouija board. You felt that you believed, and so shall it be, that ultimately it brought about a what do you call that? Like a psychological manifestation of I guess some sort of kinesis.
Yeah, well, I mean,
happening.
This is just like the girl from the pet store that I talked to a few weeks back, who was having poltergeist phenomena that was clearly coming from her. And I've had this come up in private conversations with people lately, of people working on themselves, doing shadow work, as it were, and having sort of, demonic activity come out of that.
Right.
Pop up around them. So, I mean, that's definitely a possibility, probably it. But, I mean, then there are things like, why would we be manifesting someone's backstory only for them to then turn out not to be who they say they are? I mean, go to great pains to prove that they exist, and then turn out to be some god named Acre. Why would, Kim's husband write a note about, hey, the cats are going crazy and this and that, please stop playing the Ouija board.
Right.
When we're not there.
Well, it's not to say that there's not something physical going on there that may or may not have been measurable by some instrumentation of today. I'm not saying that it's not externally active like that. What I'm saying is that collectively it was your focus and your the cats going crazy certainly could have been a product of picture. If you could see that scene with different eyes, all these kids focused around an oracle board, and you're all very focused. And what must that look like to other eyes? We don't know what is perceptible by a cat or a dog or whatever. I mean, certainly we hear in the paranormal genre of things that animals and dogs and cats are susceptible, or they perceive more than we do, or they see things differently than we do. And that could have been an explanation for that. As far as it's starting out as this positive thing and graduating to a negative thing, that could be something as easily generated by the mood of the group, or the threat of fear of what is this really. It only takes the slightest suggestion, as we know, to kind of spiral these things into completely tangential directions from where we ideally would want them to go, I guess is the way to put it.
Well, here's another thing, the bed shaking. I mean, I do remember that now that they're saying that, I do remember being terrified of bed shaking. But with the advent of this presumably Kundalini energy activated in me, there are things that happen to me that I don't talk about because they're not a big deal. And one of them is things rocking. The bed shaking, the chair rocking. I'll just notice it. All of a sudden I'm rocking. And it's not me physically rocking. It's just this energy is wafting and causing an effect.
Right.
And it's not a big deal. But I assume if I thought that was coming from a Ouija board experience, it would take on a whole other tone for me. I'd be scared shitless.
Exactly.
But it's the same thing.
Right.
So there's that. I thought it was interesting, just personally, I guess, to hear what they thought of me, because I never knew that. Like, even thinking that I'm a loner and that sort of thing, I never, I guess, saw myself that way. Paul was always the guy who was, he was the Jimmy Dean. He was the cool guy, unafraid but not tough, not like a bully.
Right.
Punk rocker type of guy, a little bit older. All the hot foreign exchange students wanted to fuck him, He was that guy. So for him to say, there was something about me that he envied is like really weird to hear. Awkward.
So you weren't the bad boy.
I was not the bad boy. No, I was the good boy. I was the exact opposite.
Wow. Chicks like the bad boys,
Yes, I found this out.
You've been the bad student, the bad son, the bad friend.
Yeah, they don't like the black sheep so much. They like the bad boy.
Yeah. Thank you, Seinfeld, for that. The bad tipper, the bad waiter, the bad pet store employee.
That's me. Wah, wah.
But, it's an interesting story. I mean, it is. And God, something like that. Wouldn't you love to have that in a controlled environment? I mean, even if it could be controlled in an environment like that, how great would that have been to study something like that in kids that age, in those situations, getting together and focusing all their energies on communicating with what you perceive to be the dead. I mean, it's just that it was ripe for something. And I don't mean to say nothing external happened. I just think that, maybe some of the physicalities that happened might have been a collective energy between all of you that manifested this thing and made it behave in the way that it does. I mean, just in the same way that we say, cultural filters affect the perceptual recognition of a paranormal event.
Yeah,
so
no,
too,
I would
this
agree.
thing,
I guess I would agree. I mean, ultimately, what does it take to have this thing happen? It takes probably the Molotov cocktail of stuff that we described during the episode in terms of extreme focus of intent. You're only talking about this. You're scared out of your mind, so you've got that heightened state of kill or be killed emotion going.
I mean, what if it comes down to that you're actually building a paranormal Frankenstein? Between you, Tracey, Paul, and Stacy, you collectively created a paranormal manifestation that took on parts of all 3 or 4 of you. And it wasn't some far-flung god of Egypt or some dead guy from, 17th century France or whatever. It was a collective Frankenstein of all 3 of you that manifested into this entity that collectively was, your thought energy that basically manifested itself into breaking the glass and making the radio come on and shaking your bed or whatever. I don't count that out. I don't count out that we can. Everybody thinks, well, you manifest something, it must come from somewhere. Well, what if it comes from you? I mean, what if you're making the entity? You're birthing it. And so, therefore, when it comes forth, what did Frankenstein do, He destroyed everything. And that's what they do. I mean, because it's like a Frankenstein. It doesn't want to be because it's not, it's not coming from a single person. It's not conjured from a single person. It's a collective manifestation, which, therefore, gets all the trappings of, shall we say, abnormal.
Right. Well, we already know that, or at least we're on the rudimentary sort of cusp of understanding, but I think it's fair to say that we have proven this exists. Intelligent plasmas, or plasmas that seem to be have some sort of intelligence or instruction about them for a limited time, and then they dissipate.
Right.
So, I mean, if something sort of semi-physical and seemingly intelligent can happen like that in the material world, how far-flung is it to believe that even something like that might be coming from us,
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's nonetheless fascinating and nonetheless still external and paranormal. So I just think it'd be really – I mean, this is where I would like to get the gentleman who did the entity case, whose name, again, eludes me because it's late and I'm exhausted. But is it Taff? Dr. Taff. I want to say that's right. I mean, I would like to know more about that whole story. I mean, you're talking about a woman who was beaten, raped, and thrown about her house and all sorts of craziness. And what, in the end, what did he find out about her as a person? What was she into? What was her life like? Et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we've all seen the movie by this point. But is that the same kind of thing? I mean, did she, through no fault of her own, conjure together some kind of manifestation of, her personality or her aggravation, disappointment, yearning, whatever? All of those things manifest into something. And what are kind of the focus crystals for something like that? Like you, me, and Banal could get together and talk about how pissed off we are at this, that, or the other, and do that from here to eternity. But what kind of mechanism is in place that actually makes what you guys experience with the Ouija board happen versus, what is the focus of intent going to that's then clicking that over as opposed to regular, conversation of this, that, or the other. What does that? See, that's what fascinates me is where does that come from? Like the discussion we had with Colin Andrews the first time we had him on. I mean, you felt the air change. And he had weird things happen. You had weird things happen. I had weird things happen.
Maybe it's what happens next is the key. So that we have weird things happen, and with the Ouija board, you either are incredibly intrigued,
exactly,
and therefore become addicted, or incredibly fearful and therefore become addicted.
Right.
And it's out of that heightened emotion that this thing builds and builds and builds.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas a conversation is a one-off.
Well, yeah. And how does a conversation like we had with him, I mean, were we three collectively
I think it would have kept
something?
going. I think we would have, we had residual stuff happen after.
Yeah,
I think if we had just kept focusing on how amazing, if we had fallen in love with what was going on with the situation, how amazing it was, then it would have kept unfolding. And I mean, in a sense, this is sort of what I get to when I was talking about, probably privately tonight, but I've talked about on the show about when this meditation energy first started to unfold, I would come to know that certain things existed that I used to poo-poo, like chakras, like psychic abilities, and all this stuff. They would manifest, these things would happen. They'd be working. And if I got bogged down in them, if I fell in love with them, then I would be exploring them. And I think, for example, psychic ability, remote viewing, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. If I'd stuck with it, I probably would be a remote viewer right now. I'd be a psychic right now. You know what I mean? Right. And it would keep manifesting and getting stronger and stronger the more attention I paid to it and the more sort of awe I had in it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same thing here that we're talking about,
Yeah.
It's the same mechanism.
Yeah, well, in which case, how bad and or good would it have gotten? How blatant would it have gotten?
Well, then you got to ask yourself, the scenarios that are presented to you, are they real? So when you have these, for instance, remote viewers who get a hit or two that seem to be good, right? Like they see a Russian sub and it turns out to be a Russian sub or whatever. That's the draw. That's the hook.
Right.
And now they start looking, and now they're seeing like alien bases on the moon and all this shit, and talking about things that are going to happen in the future that never come to pass.
Right.
So, is the hook that there is this kernel of truth that then your interest takes over, and it's no longer about whatever the truth is. It's about seeing more and more and more and more.
Exactly. Yeah. It becomes soured, or something like that. It just becomes tainted with your own desire to know more, and frankly, I mean, is not the paranormal known for kind of leaving you hanging? I mean, this is part of how it negates itself. It doesn't present when you want it to. You can't control it because you don't know how to facilitate it. Like with a Ouija board, when you're sitting down, you know what's going to happen. You know what you're going after. Whereas, all this psychic phenomenon, all of that, they really don't know exactly what facilitates that at any given moment. And so how much of that becomes disappointment, which then leads you to have to kind of force something into happening to, again, we go back to pleasing the researcher again. There's all these people standing around waiting for me to produce. And this thing doesn't produce like that. It's not measurable in that kind of way. We need new ways of measuring that. I find that the Ouija board, at least as a whole, I'll go with what a researcher told me years ago, that he believed that it opened up areas of human consciousness that some people weren't ready for. And I think that's true. I think that does do that. I mean, I studied the history of Ouija boards, years ago, and it's got some interesting roots, interestingly enough, in Egypt. So I thought it kind of interesting that you got an Egyptian name out of that, if that is indeed what that was. But I think potentially they're dangerous, depending on how you use them and what they do, despite the fact that, by and large, they are just facilitators of involuntary muscle movement. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is what effect that it has on the surrounding people with it.
It's given me some things to ponder tonight, certainly.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm stuck on why was I so adamant that the alien stuff be alien, and that this stuff is like, I mean, this stuff is happening, and I'm one of the guys going, I don't care. This isn't special. This other thing, that's special. Why?
Well, it's more personal to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Was it? I mean, this thing, like you said, I mean, this was something that forms bonds, brings you together. You get your little clique within the clique.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. Do you need something more special than that?
Well, I mean that the alien thing is particularly personal to you, and probably more important just by virtue of it being such a personal experience to you. Whereas this being in a group like that, I think being in a group, I don't care what the situation is. I think being in a group, you feel a little bit more sheltered and insulated. And so when you're alone with yourself and they come, that's a much more visceral experience than being in a group and having weird shit happen, because there's always going to be that suspicionary attitude that you're going to have, like, well, who's doing what? And, no matter how in your face something tends to be, I think that the alien experiences were just a lot more subjective and personal and specialized and in for you.
God, what a lot of fear that was growing up. Looking back on it, it's like I've got this alien shit that I feel like my mom and my sister, at least, and my dad, have to be in denial about. And I get ridiculed from them for talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get the Ouija board stuff, being tested. Testing week, and Satan saying, I'm going to drag you to hell, and then smashing a candle holder.
Yeah.
Boy, that's not a good time.
Nah.
And yet it's what we love to do, right? What is that? Why would we keep doing it? What is the draw? What is the draw of that Ouija board where it's like, we've got to see this to the end?
Well, you might ask, what is the draw of experience or support groups? Why would you go and want to expel all of this stuff out and then leave that meeting, as I did many times? And a lot of my friends in those groups would say exactly the same thing before it even came out of my mouth, that we really shouldn't be here talking about this. Like, we get the feeling we shouldn't be talking about it. Then why do we keep coming? Yet we keep coming week after week. Because ultimately, and I'll tell you, I got to apologize to this guy. I think his name was Sandy. Way back in the day, everybody who had an abduction experience, whatever they called it, wanted it to stop. That was kind of where a lot of people came from. I just want it to be over. I want to stop them. I want to figure out how to fight this thing off. And I have to admit, I felt kind of the same way. Like, how do you get out of this? This is not a club I want to be in. And I asked Sandy one time, I said, don't you want this to stop? And his answer was, well, it's scary and it's debilitating in a lot of life ways, just normal day-to-day life. It never leaves your mind. But if there's something to learn there, then no, I don't want it to stop. And I think it's that kind. And I mean, now I understand what he meant. He was a much older guy than me. Now I get what he was saying. And I think that's what it boils down to, is like your curiosity and your desire to know. Again, goes back to, what is this all about and where do we go from here? These are the hugest questions ever to face anyone. And I think in some naive way, whether it's from being young or just being so damn curious that you can't stand it, even as an older person, I think ultimately you're looking for that answer. You're trying to figure out what it's all about. And that's once that lights a fire in your belly, it's hard to put that out. So no matter how scary it is, you keep going back because you want to know. You want to know more. You think you'll get that brass ring. And you said during the interview, it was like carrot dangling. It was doing that. Let me lead you through this narrative, and we'll get to the end of that, and then another one will start. It's just the way it works. So I think it has a part in actually enticing and seducing you into that. So,
what was that noise?
I just got an instant message from Black Label Society.
Well, on that note,
yeah,
Paratopia, Join us on Sunday for Paratopia Live.
That's right.
And we'll see you next week. Otherwise, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
And we'll do intros. We do an introduction bit separately. Is there anything that you want us to say about you in that introduction bit?
I would like you to currently plug my new concern, which is I'm going to dress my cats up as G-men and find and kill Real Housewives of New Jersey.
Okay, good. Tracy, you, anything?
No, I can't possibly follow up to that.
All right, very good. 3, 2, 1.
Will you allow Paul to go on the board when he gets here? Damon.
Wait a minute.